Hi, everyone. Teri Wellbrock here, host of the Healing Place podcast. I have been on a couple of weeks hiatus from the show, impromptu. My mom has been on a health journey in hospice with liver cancer and cirrhosis of the liver. And she had a fall and hit her head very, very hard. The hospital sent her home on a private ambulance and from the emergency room and tucked her into her bed. And alone at 87 years old, excuse me. And the in-home hospice team showed up the next day and found her in pretty bad shape. So they brought her into in-house hospice. And when I talked to them and I talked to my mom, she just sounded off. Something was wrong. Like just didn't sound right. So I asked them if I should hop on a flight and fly a couple states to her. And they said that would probably be a good idea. So I did and ended up sleeping 12 nights on a couch in her hospice room from March 2nd until March 14th, my birthday. And as my sister was hanging a happy birthday banner over my mom's bed, so she was going to sing happy birthday to me, my mom took her final breath. And all I can say is that I saw something that will forever, forever be with me, because I said to my sister, she's smiling, she's smiling. Now, my mom had been not conscious? Is that the right word? For over 4 days, possibly more. It became a blur. Unable to speak, not opening her eyes. And this smile on her final breath lit up her entire face as if she was looking on something so magnificent. So I don't know who was there to greet her, an angel, my dad, Jesus, God. I'm not quite sure. The heaven pearly gates, I don't know. But all I know is that it lit up her entire being. And then she was gone. So, and after that, I went to my sister's place and slept on her couch for a few more days, waiting for my flight to return home. We're heading back for her memorial mass this coming Monday, March 27th. So that is where I've been and why there's been no new episodes put out. I just was spending time with my mom, my sister, my son, my family, friends gathered around my mom's side, singing her songs and reading to her from her prayer books and saying the rosary and just loving on her and kissing on her and telling her how much I love her. I'm so glad we had a chance to do our healing work over the last few years as we both came to terms with our codependent relationship and her addiction history. But it was a perfect ending, I think, for her, as I could tell by that smile, but for us. So thanks, Mom, for that gift. I love you so much, and wow, am I going to miss you. All right, now for today's episode. Welcome, everybody, to the Healing Place podcast. I'm your host, Teri Wellbrock, and so very happy to have with me today Lora Solomon, and she is a nurse practitioner with 30 plus years of healthcare experience, certified by the Institute of Functional Medicine, author, plant medicine advocate, and an expert in the intersection of between trauma and the physical body. So welcome, Lora.
Thank you. Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yes, well, we were having a great conversation before recording, so I should have recorded all of that.
I
So
know.
yeah, so talk to us. Well, one, before we get into this, I just want to remind everybody this is one of the special episodes that I'm putting out extra every week for the Healers of Hilton Head series, no matter where you're living in the world, which is now just found out last night in 123 countries. Folks are tuning in. Yeah, even if you don't live on Hilton Head Island or the Lowcountry area, this purpose of this series is to highlight and shine a light on these beautiful healers within my own community. So look within your own community. And so many of these healers also are able to work with folks all over the world. So yeah, it's great to bring them to you anywhere. So anyway, just had to put that little bit in there. So yeah, Laura, talk to us about really, I guess we should start with the intersection of trauma or between trauma and the physical body. What is that?
Well, to talk about that, I probably should just talk about my story because that's the best example. And you already mentioned that I'm an author, and in that book, really, what I do is I use my story to express a bigger story that we're kind of all in. But I grew up in a religious cult. Of course, when I was in it, I didn't know that's what I was in it, what I was in. So was, and like any cult, it wasn't all bad. There was a lot of positive, but there was also some really dark aspects to it. And then gradually got away from that and decided I was going to be a scientist. I had enough of that crazy religious whatever. I was like, this isn't right. I'm going to be a logical, rational scientist, and I'm going to go to college, and I'm putting all that behind me, which I did, and I did well in school and I loved it. And pretty quickly after I became a nurse, as I started with an associate's degree and RN in a Catholic hospital, I was I was like right away able to see this isn't healthy either. And in a way, it was like almost like another cult. It was very dysfunctional. And on one hand, it was like, oh, we're doing good in the world, we're saving lives. But then I could see this just underlying dysfunction. So I was like, wait a minute, like what's happening? But of course, I had invested time and energy, money, and I was kind of bought in. Meanwhile, I had not even started to unpack my own trauma. And so, as we know, and probably everyone listening here, if they're listening to this, they understand, eventually that has to be dealt with. It kind of doesn't go away. And it started out first with chronic pain that no one could explain. Like, I'm healthy, I'm young, I eat right, I do all the things, I go to the doctor, all my labs are normal. And it's like, why do you have chronic pain? Nobody knows. And I had some anxiety and some depression, but I was what you would call functional, like it, I was still able to fake it enough that most people had no idea. And on the outside, it looked, I was able to make things look good on the outside and hide what was going on the inside, which is kind of what I learned growing up in this cult. Like, there's all this stuff going on in secret, but on the surface, when you show up in church, you are all dressed up and you're singing the songs and you're leading the church. And so it was just like it was a learned behavior to hide what was going on. And yeah, so that went on for a while, and the chronic pain went away, and then I lost a body part. You would have thought that would have gotten my attention. For me, it was an ovary. They say, oh, you can live with that. You got two of them, you'll be fine. And so, but nobody could explain why that happened, like why a part of my body literally tied itself in a knot, and I ended up in a surgically, emergency to have this ovary taken out, or I would have died. Like, but it was
Wow.
like, well, that just happens. I'm like, okay, just go on with your life, because the scientific cult that I was in did not have a way to even address that, talk about it, understand it. It was just all this very materialistic you're kind of a flesh robot and there's not anything else to you. That was what I learned as a scientist. And so I go on a few more, years or so. I was on medication for depression, anxiety, which I didn't really like, but I didn't like how I felt off of it either. So that was really all I was offered. And surprisingly enough, and I don't know if it was because I was such a good actress and I was able to almost tell the therapist what they wanted to hear, which is silly, but it's like those old habits die hard, or that I was seeing therapists who were not insightful enough or understanding enough to really see a trauma pattern, like to spot it when it was right in front of them. But it ended up, the pain came back. And so I went back again to the doctors and this, that, and it was do this test. We think it's this diagnosis. Let's try this. Let's try that. One medicine dropped my blood pressure so low, I ended up in the emergency room. Another one burned a hole in my esophagus. So I had an ulcer, and so, but this was the best, that modern medicine. And I was a nurse practitioner, married to a doctor by this point. I was seeing the best of the best, the specialists, and this was the best they could offer me. And finally, in an act of desperation, I just said, okay, I guess I'm going to live with chronic pain the rest of my life. This is just my reality. And I went to Queens College. I lived in Charlotte at the time, to take a meditation class because I had heard that mindfulness can help with chronic pain. And it's funny now just how the spirit, God, the divine, whatever you call it, just pursues you with so much. God, it brings tears to my eyes. Just so much goodness.
You got me crying because I felt it this past 2 years. Yes.
Just so much. Anyway, pull myself together. Okay. So my teacher, my meditation teacher, happened to be a minister. So I would have never stepped foot in anything close to a church, but I would go to a college and take a class. But I guess my teacher was a minister. And she gave me a Harris Teeter bag full of cassette tapes. And I didn't even know what it was. She said, I think you would enjoy this. And it was Carolyn Myss. I don't know if you know of her, Carolyn Myss. It's Myss. It was a book called The Anatomy of the Spirit. And what Carolyn Myss was a self-identified medical intuitive and an energy worker. And she was able to see how your energy patterns would eventually create illness in the body. And I had never heard that this was a thing. Like, this was the first time. But I was, as soon as she started talking, I was like riveted. I was like, oh, wow, this is true.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you hear it, and then suddenly you're like, all of your cells just become alive, like the truth. Here's the truth. And you can't undo the truth.
You can't undo it. And so now it was still a pretty long journey for me to start to but so I started to learn about the energy centers in the body. I started to learn about these patterns. I started to connect the dots between the trauma and what was showing up in my body, what my body was telling me, what my body was showing, how my body was actually trying to help me to see and to actually heal. And then once I saw that, I also was able to see it in every patient that I came into contact with. It was like, as soon as I was able to see my trauma patterns, I was able to see theirs. And I couldn't stop myself from seeing it. As soon as they showed up in front of me or started talking to me, it was like I was tracking. I couldn't not do it. And I would try to talk to them about it. And some people were open, some people were not, right? Some people were very caught in, this is a physical problem. There must be a physical solution. It has nothing to do with my emotions or my spirit. It has, and some people were not open to that. And some people were. But the more I realized, it was almost like having like an X-ray vision. Like you just see what you see and you can't unsee it. And so then you're having a conversation. It's almost like you're pretending. Well, let's pretend we don't know what's really going on. And I'm going to pretend along with you. And we're going to order all these tests and we're going to change your diet 18 times. And, and I can see what's really happening, And so are we going to just pretend that it's not happening?
Right.
So then I ended up in functional medicine because I was very much like, we're going to get to the root cause. We're going to get to the root cause. I'm tired of just prescribing pharmaceuticals where we're managing symptoms, which sometimes managing symptoms is what you have to do because the symptoms are really out of control. If someone has blood pressure that's so high they're about ready to have a stroke, then you got to deal with that while you also go and say, what's the cause? Like, what's going on? And I actually listened to I did listen to some of your other podcasts, but it was actually today when we were talking, you mentioned the ACE score, right? Adverse childhood events. So and in functional medicine, one of the things we learned first is how to do a timeline. And a timeline is where you talk to someone and you go back to before they were born. You actually ask them about their parents. And you're not just asking about physical symptoms, like did they have high blood pressure? Did they have cancer? You're asking them really about trauma. Like, what was their life like? Like, what was happening in your mother's life when she was carrying you? Was she in a secure and happy relationship? Was she connected with community? What was her health like? And so I started doing that, and I knew that it was a step in the right direction, but I was always attracted to what was even deeper than that, just really understanding what beliefs people had about themselves and what their beliefs were about the world and where those beliefs came from and how those beliefs were actually creating illness. And Carolyn Mace taught me this, your biography, your story becomes your biology. Right? But for most people, their stories are not conscious. So your body will show you what the unconscious stories are if you know how to look, if you know how to read it. And yeah, so that just became something I was more and more interested in. And it created a fair amount of conflict because it's kind of funny. I was working in like a boutique hormone replacement functional medicine practice. And so a woman would come in, I'm in menopause. I think I need some, estrogen. I got hot flashes and my vagina's dry and I need, blah, blah, blah. Right. And so I would be like, okay, but then I couldn't help myself. I would really be very interested in what's going on in your relationships, what's going on in your life, what's trying to show up. Tell me about your relationship to your body, like when you started your period and what your sexuality was like. And I couldn't help it. I couldn't help asking those questions because I knew that was going to affect how a woman went through menopause. It's just another iteration in a woman's relationship to her own body and her sexuality and her identity. And I just couldn't help myself. So I would be in there doing these, and of course my supervising physicians would be like, why are you talking to people about this? Like, just give them their hormones, make their hot flashes go away. And this happened to me even as a new nurse practitioner. Someone would come into me with anxiety or depression, and instead of just giving them their prescription for Xanax, which would take 5 minutes, just refill, but Xanax, all right, bye, see you in a month or 3 months or whatever, I would go into like, where is this coming from? What's going on with you? And the doctors, because this is not basically a very good financial model for, they want you to see a patient every 15 minutes. Well, you can't have those kind of conversations in 15 minutes, right? And so what happened is, I guess I evolved myself out of a job because I could no longer fit into that model. And then eventually I developed my own practice, my own business, where that's what I do. And it's like, if people are not ready or don't want to have a conversation about what's really going on, then that's okay. It's not for me to push people into that kind of conversation, because I have done that and it doesn't work out for anybody. But if people are ready, then I go there with them. And I think I mentioned this to you, and this might not seem connected, but I'm going to connect it back. Is part of my recovery was my introduction to plant medicine, and most particularly psilocybin. So psilocybin, I had asked you, do you know what psilocybin is? Is what's in magic mushrooms. Okay, so mushrooms, which existed on planet Earth for millions of years before humans ever showed up. And if mushrooms did not exist, there would be no soil, so we wouldn't even be here. So it's an intelligent being. It's like these teachers that we have. And what happened for me is what happens for a lot of people with this introduction. I heard an interview with Michael Pollan, who wrote a book called How to Change Your Mind. That book came out probably close to 10 years ago now. And he really talked about the history of psychedelics mostly in the United States, but even throughout humanity's history. And I had never learned in all of my even functional medicine, like 10 years of college, had never learned about the research that was done with LSD and psilocybin in the 50s and 60s. Never heard about it. It was just never mentioned, never brought up. I was just like, drugs are bad. This is your brain on drugs. LSD makes people jump off of buildings. You're going to take this. You're going to be a scrambled mess. You're going to go insane. Like, just right. So I just didn't understand the potential healing of these substances. And then, I read this book, I got very curious. Then I would realize, oh my gosh, there's like 20 years of research out of Johns Hopkins for depression, treatment-resistant depression, anxiety, trauma. Like, why hadn't I heard about this? So after I stopped being angry about like the hell, then I was like, got really curious. All right, let me check this out. So I ended up going to the Netherlands, where one of the places in the world where psilocybin is legal, and was at a retreat it was a group retreat with 12 other, it was only women, and we had 4 guys and 12 women, and I had a psilocybin experience, and I felt safe in my body for the first time in my life.
Yeah.
It's like, I didn't even know that experience was possible, available. I didn't even know that I had never felt safe in my body. It's like, you just don't know what you don't know. So after I had that experience, I was like, okay, because this is something I already knew. Until your nervous system feels safe, you can't heal. I already knew that from all my other training and all my other experience. And so I knew about these other modalities. I had worked with heart math for a long time. I knew about all these, breath work, all these other scientific methods for trying EMDR, which I had to try to bring the nervous system back into a state of equilibrium so healing can even happen. Right. So for myself and for many people, that switch of being in fight or flight was just on. It was basically stuck in on. It was just stuck there. And this psilocybin experience flipped the switch.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I
Flip the
love it. And
switch.
that leads me to my question of,
Yeah.
so does research show, or is it still, or are they still trying to figure it out, or is it just we're just going to let it work its magic? Um, I know for me, EMDR did that same sort of thing in that it helped me process that stored negative energy, as I call it,
Yes.
from my
Yeah.
traumatic
Mm-hmm.
experiences. But it almost sounds like this does the same thing. Maybe some brain rewiring, maybe just some release, some like helping your body, your mind release that stored negative energy.
Well, that's an awesome question. And there are a lot of people spending a lot of money trying to figure out how psilocybin works. And a lot of pharmaceutical companies trying to isolate, is it this, is it that, is it so they can patent drugs. Okay, so there's a lot, it's a whole industry now trying to figure out. I don't think they're going to be able to do it because it's beyond that. It's a mystical experience, and you're not going to be able to put a mystical experience in a pill
Right.
ever. It's a mystical experience, and that there's something called the mystical experience questionnaire, which the Good Friday experiment that was done about 50 years ago, when it was before it became, well, actually probably more than 50 years ago, 60 years ago, before things like psilocybin and LSD were made illegal, because psilocybin, even after everything I just told you, is illegal in most parts of the world. So here we have a powerful healing medicine that is still illegal in most parts of the world, but that's a different conversation. They found that it's the actual mystical experience that creates the opportunity for healing. And there's no magic wand. Okay. So the psilocybin is amazing. It's an amazing catalyst for healing. But if it's not done with the right preparation, in the right setting, with the right support, with the right integration, it is just a cool experience that doesn't really make it into your life. So, right, there are many people that have taken, magic mushrooms and gone to a Fish concert, and they still have not healed their trauma, and they still, are having issues. So it's not just the intelligence that's in the substance. It's all aspects. And that's another thing that kind of the pharmaceutical industry, with their reductionistic approach, is always just trying to extract. We're going to find the molecule, we're going to extract it, we're going to patent it, and then we're going to put it out as a pill. It's not honoring all the other aspects that this is. First of all, it can't, there's not, you can't, it's the whole plant, it's the whole mushroom. It's not, you can't just isolate any aspect of it. Now, certainly certain aspects, like for psilocybin, it's the psilocybin, and then your body converts that to psilocin. And we know that that is probably the aspect that induces a psychedelic experience. But you need everything else that's in that mushroom to actually have the healing outcome. And you also need the preparation and the integration to have the outcome.
Yes.
Is that making sense?
Yes.
So it's a powerful way for someone to have an embodied. For me, like, I did EMDR, and I'm not saying that it didn't help me. Maybe EMDR prepped me so the psilocybin was able to work the way it did. I don't want to say any part of my journey didn't work. I feel like maybe it did to the level that I could, but it was not able to give me that embodied experience of safety. It just wasn't.
Yeah.
EMDR didn't do it for me, to that extent.
I love that you painted that picture that way, because I know for me, my EMDR journey, I did 4 years, 98 sessions, and
Mm,
it really, really helped me process this crazy amount of trauma. But then we hit walls that we just couldn't get to certain things. I still had panic attacks driving over bridges. I still had panic attacks, being farther away from home, not as intense. And I don't even want to say panic attacks, because my panic attacks stopped. It was more just heightened anxiety, but I still just couldn't. I just couldn't process something. There was something there. So then I, like you said, I felt like it helped me get to this next step, right?
yes.
Then I was able to do some parts work and some somatic healing.
Yes,
Then I
yes.
was able to take it to the next level and then I went back to EMDR. And so
Mm-hmm.
it really is like every step along the healing journey, especially if you allow, like you said, spirit to guide you,
Mm-hmm.
and you open yourself up to the possibility. I love the wording you just said. It was so brilliant of this experience. If you It opens the opportunity for healing. So
Yes.
like you said, yeah, you can take this and then go to a concert, and it's you're not there for the
Yeah,
opportunity of
right.
healing. But if you go with the intent of and allowing that opportunity, oh my gosh, yeah,
Yeah.
miracles can happen.
Yeah. And, one of the things when people reach out to me and are looking for some guidance, they're like, well, what if I have a bad trip? Right. And, I think there's really no such thing. There are trips that happen without proper preparation in a setting that's not um, safe and supportive. And if you open up to a lot of emotion and you're at a concert or you're someplace or you're not someplace where someone can hold that space and be with you, and it can feel overwhelming. There's a reason we suppress things. It's
Yeah,
overwhelming, right?
right.
So it's self-protective. So in a way, if you do something that intentionally takes the lid off and it all comes back, you feel whole, you feel amazing, but you also might feel overwhelmed, right?
Yeah,
Because there's all this emotion that you have protected yourself from, not consciously, but as a child. If you're in a setting where you don't have an adult who is self-regulated themselves and they can't hold you while you have all of your emotion, then right, you subconsciously suppress it, because you say you read the environment. Babies are born very wise. They can read the environment and they can say what's safe and what's not safe. And a child can look at their parent's face and read, this adult is not okay with who I am or what I am right now, and they can self-adjust. Children do that all the time because it's survival adaptation. And that's what I write a lot about in my book, is just seeing, yay, my book, survival at it's writing that book. It's been about a year now since I wrote it. Is like it brought up a lot of trauma for me, because I wrote about some things that were traumatic for me, but I didn't want to leave these things out, because I felt like I didn't want people to feel sorry for me or look at me in a different way, but I also didn't want to leave parts of my story out because it wouldn't make sense. It's like there would be a gap. But there's one chapter in particular that I talk about something, and I had an editor that was helping me, and I noticed that when she was editing, she stopped reading, and then she also wrote me a letter and said, you need to warn people that this book could be triggering. And I was awake that whole night because I thought I had triggered my editor and put her into some kind of trauma response. And, I wrote back to her and I said, do you think I should leave this out? Do you think it's too much? And she said, no, you should absolutely leave it in there, but you definitely need to warn people
yeah,
that, And I was like, okay, I get that.
Right.
Like
Right.
I want to be respectful, but that I don't want to sugarcoat or make it, less honest,
Yeah. Yeah.
because that,
So I do, to go back for just a second, you had mentioned, and maybe before we hit record, microdosing. So
yes,
what, so being that is this illegal, like in the United States? Would someone
so
have to go to the Netherlands to have
that's a
this
very good
experience?
question. So this present moment, what are we, November 2022, it is legal in Oregon in a therapeutic setting. It's legal within a study. It's been decriminalized now in many places. And Colorado just recently voted to legalize it. So it's coming. There are and have been for decades people that do this, for lack of a better word, in the underground, that support people in using these substances therapeutically. There has existed this whole other arena of it. It's there. It's available.
Yeah.
Now, there are some people that do it in a religious context. So if it's your sincere religious belief that psilocybin helps you to connect with what you identify as God, then in the United States, we have religious protection. We don't have religious protection for recreational use, for anything like that, but we do in the United States. We have religious protection, and this is not just for psilocybin, it's for peyote, ayahuasca. These are other medicines that have been used. There's something called toad medicine. So there are other medicines, natural substances, or sacraments, really is probably the better word. So these are sacraments. And interestingly enough, there's a book called The Immortality Key, by a gentleman, Brian Morawski or something like that. And he has evidence that the communion that Christians were using to connect and commune with God was some type of psychedelic. So the original communion, this flesh of the gods, was some kind of psychedelic. So our human history of using this for religious reasons or to have a mystical experience, that's thousands of years. It's not. So in the United States, in a religious setting, with that as a sacrament, we do have religious protection. And then outside of that, Costa Rica, Jamaica, the Netherlands, there are other places, the Bahamas are other places that people go, and there are above ground, so we have underground and we have above ground. So places that have, psilocybin, ayahuasca, ibogaine is another powerful, powerful medicine out of Africa that its benefits for people with opiate addiction are far and away better than anything we have.
Yeah.
So these medicines are there. They've been there or these sacraments are there, or these ways of healing are there. And yeah, so bringing it back to, root cause, this trauma, and how trauma can be the root cause for a lot of illnesses. If you look at the adverse childhood events, and someone who has a score above, what is it, 7, their risk of cancer, heart disease, diabetes, Alzheimer's, like all of these things go up dramatically.
Yeah. Even a 4 above is,
Yeah. So maybe I'm
everything just
thinking
jumps.
everything jumps. Alcoholism, it's like, it's just so it's there. Like the research is there. We know it. We have a healthcare system that just ignores it.
Yes.
It's like la 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 la. We're just gonna ignore that. Like what? Like we okay. Like, but
Right.
I'm not participating in that. Like I'm not gonna sit across from a human being and ignore who they are.
Right.
I'm not gonna do it.
Gosh, I
But
remember well, and again, I've talked about it on the show a couple of times when I was first really got sick
yeah,
almost 2 years ago now after moving to Hilton Head and new
and
doctor, right? I had to find a new doctor. Ended up in front of this uh, doctor and very a younger person. So I thought, oh, this person will be more in tune with.
open-minded.
I was wrong. So they had my lab. She had my lab report sitting in front of her, and I had moved here perfectly healthy, and all of a sudden, my electrolytes are out of whack. My vitamin D levels, my vitamin C levels, my blood pressure's through the roof. Like 20 different things went wrong with me, and it all at the same time, right? And so I had tears in my eyes, and I was obviously a natural human emotion, upset, worried, sad. And her first words out of her mouth when she looked at me said, well, I think the first thing we're going to do is put you on some anti-anxiety meds.
Oh my God.
Because, and I said, whoa, hold up. You have no idea of my history and what I've done to get to this place. This
Yeah,
is not anxiety sitting in front of
right.
you. This is a natural human emotion with
Yeah,
an obviously worrisome situation.
yeah,
And so you don't know my history. You don't know, you haven't asked me anything about me and what I've done. And you just see tears and think, let's throw this pill at you and get you out in my 15-minute window.
yep. And this provider has been indoctrinated
Yeah,
into like the cult of pharmaceuticals.
right.
There's a pill for everything.
Yeah, mask the symptom instead of
Mask the
looking at the root
symptoms.
cause, which thankfully I was able to go, okay, that's not the right person for me, and found my way eventually onto the right person who said, uh, Teri, I think you might have some mold toxicity going on. You should
Yeah.
probably test your house. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
Mold? What are you talking about? Tested the house, high levels of aspergillus. Tested my body, high levels of ochratoxin A from aspergillus. So I was like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm poisoned. And that's why my body's gone cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs.
Right.
So,
Yes.
yeah,
Well,
then,
I'm just going to offer you a little reframe because when I hear your story, I think 2 years ago is when you started to get well, not when you started to get sick.
yeah, it's so true. Oh my gosh, I want to hug you for that. I so agree. I get it now.
You
Like,
started to get well, and your body, you know, and this is kind of when I hear your story, right? Everything has a frequency, right? Mold has a frequency. And everything is conspiring for us to heal. So, mold, and it's so easy to demonize the thing that creates the unwanted symptom and see it as the enemy instead of the teacher
right.
or the love that's just chasing you down,
Oh
right?
my gosh,
So
yes.
it's like it's like mold was the love that wrestled you to the ground
Yeah. Oh
and
my gosh,
said
Laura, yes.
you are loved, woman. Like stop, stop. Like you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I get it. And I've been doing some brain rewiring, some neuroplasticity work. And one of the things I do when I do my meditation is remind myself that it the mold was just that was like the final straw to for my body, like to say enough, it's time to deal with all of this, it's time. But that I had been exposed to mold before, I had lived with mold before, I had cleaned it up before when we found a
We're
water spot in our
surrounded by
house.
mold.
What?
We're surrounded by mold
Yeah,
all the
we're
time.
surrounded by it. I mean, and so, I mean, I even had a doctor tell me on a really little side note when my kidneys started malfunctioning before I got to this place of healing. And I'd gone to this urologist, and he was like, you live in South Carolina, you might as well move. Like that was his response to it instead of compassion. So I, again, I'm now understanding with this brain rewiring. So now I've like said, it's not the mold, It's not the mold. Like that was just that thing that you needed, right, Teri? And so now we just
You
ripped
were
the last,
stubborn,
yeah, the
like
last
most of us,
carpet came
right?
out and we came across some mold patches. And I did not respond. As a matter of fact, I just got my labs back and all of my mycotoxins are back in the normal range. Like my body has learned. I processed, I did all the healing work. And so again, I love what you just said. And my heart hugs yours, my soul hugs yours, because that's very, very powerful. And then it's a great
Yeah.
message for everyone to hear.
Yes. Yes. And that does not, I'm not into being in like, bypassing true suffering. And, this just journey to recovery is terrifying sometimes and will bring you right to the brink of facing your own death.
Yeah.
And, grief is part of it. So deep, sadness and rage and it's real. It's real. And it's just love chasing you down. Like, that's what it is.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's just, and many of us are stubborn. We don't want to let go of the old story about who we are, who we think we are, and what we think this life is. It's like we cling to that even though it's killing us. Literally, it can kill you. It's like that's what survival adaptation is. It's you respond to life in a way that you survive, and your body records that and says, this is the way to stay alive. Just do this over and over and over again. And the evidence that it works is in the mirror. Like you look in the mirror, you're still alive, right? So you can't really argue with that. But at the same time, it keeps you from evolving. It keeps you from growing. It keeps you from expanding. So then there has to be a leap of faith. Like a leap of faith, courage is the most important part of healing, hands down, because to go from just masking symptoms or chasing that material thing to actually healing, there is a leap. There is a leap of faith. And it just is, it doesn't have anything to do with religion or God, but it can. But it is like, okay, I'm going to literally face the fact that I'm not going to keep doing this the same old way because it's killing me.
Yes. Yes. Oh my gosh, you have me teared up again. Like, oh my gosh, so powerful. Yes.
Yes, yes, yes.
It keeps
So
you from living. Like what you
it does.
were saying, it so resonates with me. The ocean used to be my favorite place in the world. Like I found such sanctuary in it. And then as I continued to do a lot of my EMDR healing work and so forth, I suddenly started becoming fearful of open spaces. And so being out on the beach, which was my favorite place in the world, scared me. And so, but again, I think I was being taken to that next. All right, it's time. You can't live like this anymore, Teri. You're still holding on to something.
Mm-hmm.
So, oh, very powerful. You're really speaking to me on a soul
Yeah,
level.
yeah. And that's in the work that I do, I actually take people through a hero's journey. So I use the hero's journey as the framework for healing because I see healing as a hero's journey.
Yeah.
And so, Joseph Campbell, coined that phrase 100 years ago. It's not anything new. But when people start to see themselves and whatever they're going through as the hero, as on a hero's journey, it because we are meaning making machines. Like it's not what happens to us, it's the story that we tell ourselves about what's happening and the meaning about it. We're not like we were talking about our dogs earlier, right? If you forget to feed your dogs today, they are going to be hungry, but they're not going to go into a whole story about she doesn't love me anymore. I must be getting old. I'm not cute. Oh my God. What if she, what? The dog is not going to do that. Dog is going to be hungry, but they're not going to make up a story about it. We Can't do that. We tell ourselves a story about everything. So the way somebody looks at you, the way somebody talks to you, if you're sitting next to someone and they get up and move to a different chair, you're going to notice that. You're going to tell yourself a story about it, right? The truth could be that that chair wasn't comfortable and they just needed to move, but you might say, "Oh, it's because they don't like me. There's something wrong with me," right? So we're living inside of a story, and that's where our power, our healing is. It's in the story, and that brings me back to, your biography becomes your biology. There's a story there. And when people realize that and how powerful it is to change the story, then they get into the driver's seat of their healing process, right? So even the story about mold, mold is attacking me. I'm a victim. Mold is gonna kill me. Mold is gonna destroy me, versus mold is my partner. Mold is my teacher. Mold loves me. Mold is showing me something real and true. Like, do you see the difference?
Yeah. Oh,
It's
totally.
just a story, I mean, not
Mold
just a
awakened
story.
me, right?
Yes, it awakened you. And for me, it could be like the pain in my body that I was feeling. I don't want to feel pain, right? So pain I wanted it to go away, but the pain was like love pursuing me. Like,
Yeah.
yeah. And there's actually a Bible verse. I don't know. I think it's in Psalms, but it's surely goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life. That that the truer translation of that is surely goodness and mercy will pursue me.
Yeah. It's so true.
I know, and it's so beautiful. And there's nothing more sacred than to be with someone who's in a health crisis, because they are in that moment of being pursued, and to help them rest and stop and see it and understand what's happening, is well, it's something I'm really good at. I'm
Well,
just gonna
my
own
God.
that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sitting here going, holy moly, this is awesome. Brilliant.
It is.
Yeah.
It's like, I think we all have a genius. I do believe this, and that's part of the hero's journey. When you go on the hero's journey, you come out, you seize the sword. You come out of it with a genius, with a gift that was only yours and only available to you because of your journey. It's like, oh, it's so good, right?
Yeah.
And so, that's one of the swords that I've seized on my hero's journey, is a deep understanding. And now it's a gift. Like, I can be with anybody in any situation and just be in that gap of, you might not see it right now, but I can see it as clear as day.
Right.
And I'm going to hold in the gap, stand in the gap, hold that knowledge, hold that awareness, and you're going to see it too.
Right.
At some point,
Awesome.
in the fullness of time.
I could sit here and talk to you for hours on end, but I know we're ready
I know, me too.
wrap it up.
Let's wrap it up.
So you may
Oh,
have
wait a minute. You asked me about microdosing,
yes,
and
I
I'm
just was gonna say,
sorry.
you may have answered this, but just not to leave folks hanging. What is microdosing?
Okay,
Like
I
little
apologize.
introduction.
Yeah. Okay, so macro and micro, right? Macro is big, micro is tiny, right? So that you just kind of start there. So when people have a psychedelic experience that they might call a trip, or the research that's been done in these therapeutic doses, they are macro doses. Then people have what you would call a mystical experience. So elements of a mystical experience are, you're not in your ordinary state of consciousness. Your perception of time, your perception of space, your perception of what is true is different. You actually come into contact with a truer truth than is normally accessible to you. You can experience visual changes, auditory changes. You're not like out of your mind. You don't forget who you are or where you are, even what day of the week it is or who's the president. It's not like you're disoriented, but you're you, but things are more open and you're seeing things in a different way. So that's a macro dose or a big dose experience. And microdose, and people microdose with all kinds of things, but let's just take psilocybin, for example, is a much, much smaller amount that you would take once a week or twice a week. There's different ways of microdose, and there's not actually been any research. All of the data is anecdotal data. So there's no double-blind randomized control studies. These are all people doing it and reporting back, but there are a lot of people who have made these reports. People do microdose. I'll talk about psilocybin specifically for depression, anxiety, overall brain health, memory, creativity, being able to get into flow states to help with cravings for sugar, nicotine, other substances. So people do it for a lot of different reasons. And it's a much smaller amount. So just give you an example, a macrodose could potentially be 3 to 5 grams of psilocybin. A microdose is 0.05 to maybe 0.1 grams. So much, 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 much smaller. And the kind of paradoxical piece is that your microdose is perfect, spot on, when you actually can't feel anything. So it's you're not really, you feel better overall globally, but you don't feel altered in any way. And I created a microdosing course because many people who have a macrodose experience are then interested in the potential benefits of microdosing. And so I did create a course. It's about an hour and a half where I take people through all of this, like the science, what we know, what we don't know, and exactly why to do it and how to do it. And then people do something else with microdosing, which is something called stacking. So they will include some like lion's mane or turkey tail mushrooms and maybe niacin, different things to even enhance the effects of microdosing. So it's a whole thing. Apparently in Silicon Valley, they've been microdosing LSD for a long time. It's not new. But yeah, people do it for a variety of reasons. And a lot of people will have a relationship with psilocybin as a substance where they will macrodose, a couple times a year to really kind of clear things out. It's a huge, you talked about neuroplasticity. It is a big neuroplasticity reset. It's like taking your computer and hitting Control Alt Delete reset. Like boom, you're reset. You're lined up. You are tuned up. You're in it. And then the psilocybin microdose kind of just helps to, kind of keep that in place.
Gotcha.
Yeah. But if anyone's interested in psilocybin as a substance, Michael Pollan's work, his book, How to Change Your Mind, and it's actually a Netflix movie now.
Okay.
How to Change Your Mind. I think he does a good job of sharing it in a way that's helpful.
Yeah. Well, and I love it that all of this stuff is coming round. Like the people are, I don't know, I think COVID, a lot of people are waking up to holistic and plant medicine. And I know it's certainly come to light for me and this journey I've been on and utilizing so many wonderful things. Western medicine had no answer for me for mold toxicity.
Yeah, no, it doesn't.
Yeah. And so being able to detox my body with binders and activated charcoal and bentonite clay and taking Epsom salt baths and Aztec healing clays and pulling these toxins out of my system. But like you said, taking that whole journey, honoring my body, treating it better, feeding it better.
You're really just talking about loving yourself. That's all you're talking about, right? Loving yourself better.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah. I'm curious about one thing. the link that you made from the relationship between the mold toxicity and trauma, was that a connection that you made yourself?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you did not have a provider who
Yeah.
linked
Well,
that up for you?
no. I mean, I talked about it a little bit with my nutritionist in Bluffton, but I'm always open to anything that comes across my radar, like anything that comes across my path. And um, I had put part of my story out on Nextdoor and through this mold journey, and a neighbor, reached out and said, "Oh my gosh, I have experienced, I had mold toxicity in another place in North Carolina." Anyway, so we started chatting, and she brought up the Gupta program, and which is brain rewiring. And I said, "Oh my gosh, I have had that sitting in my like maybe box for quite a while, and I keep looking at it and keep looking at it and keep looking at it." And as soon as she said it, it was like that, the little tinkles and the light bulb, and I was like, "There it is. Okay." And I said, "Let's do it together." And so she's like, "Oh, that would be great to have somebody in support." And so then it was like, okay, this is it. And so I just dove in,
and that program helped you to see the connection between the trauma and your and your relationship with mold.
Yes. Yeah. And so that's what I've been doing, just a lot of, daily meditations and mindfulness and the practice just to do the brain rewiring. And what a huge difference it's made. Yeah.
Yay.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So how do folks connect with you, work with you, get in touch with you?
Yeah. So I have a website. It's lorasolomon.com, and it's LORASOLOMON. A lot of times people misspell my first and last name.com. I have a YouTube channel with this by the same name. I have a podcast, Sacred Rebellion Podcast. So I'm kind of all over the place. If you can, and I have a book. So
I know I held it up earlier.
If you read my book, you will know
from wounds
to wisdom. I say you'll know more about me than you want to know. But I hope more than that, you will know more about yourself, because the whole purpose in sharing my story and then the questions at the end of each chapter is to help you to understand your own story. It's not about my story. My story is about my healing journey, but your healing journey is about you. So, using that to help you on your journey is what my hope and dream is for the book.
Wonderful. Well, I say I've been writing my book for 9 years now, but same thing. Like, as we put our truths out there, that's when those soul connections happen. People can resonate with your story, and then, it helps them, lead them to healing. So thank you for your courage and putting your truth out there.
You're welcome.
All right. Well, everyone, Lora, thank you so much again for being here with me today, and sharing your wisdom and certainly enlightening me. All right.
You're very welcome. Thank you for hosting me.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us today on the Healing Place podcast. And remember, until next time, be gentle with yourself. Thanks. Bye-bye. Hey, everybody. Teri Wellbrock again. Just wanted to thank you for listening to the episode today, and remind you to visit my website as well as the academy.teriwellbrock.com for the courses. But if you go to my website, teriwellbrock.com, you can sign up for my monthly Hope for Healing newsletter, which is also jam-packed with information and strategies and blog pieces and guest blog pieces and links to shows. And just a great space for, again, healing. Thanks for, again, being here and being a part of this healing space. I very much appreciate you. All right. Bye-bye.